How's it going, YouTube? Coming at you today with another video. And today, guys, what the bring to you is the next episode of the podcast. Today, we're going to have a really awesome discussion with some friends here if you want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hello, I'm Lampi, aka Sebastian Lamke, and you may know me from being a caster at the European Ggez, and I also do stream live on Twitch on a very regular basis, and I'm happy to be joining here.
Hi, I'm Tommy Rowe. I've been playing the game since I was 6, super competitive the whole time, and I upload on YouTube sometimes.
Hey, we're Crash Cards. You might know us. We have a channel. We're the people with 70 plus alpacas. We upload a lot. We have fun. Hope you like us. Hi.
With the discussion today, I want to hear a lot of your different inputs because there's definitely been a lot happening to the game lately, especially the emergency ban list. I know that a lot of people were just trying to decide whether or not it was an emergency, but still was pretty early regardless. So it's one thing that we do got to talk about because there were some interesting hits on there, and so we're going to be bringing up that and some other decks that are actually coming back to the meta as well that we'll be talking about, so I hope that everyone's excited for that. If you haven't already checked out the sponsors to the channel over at Imperium Dose, Dragon Shield, or Gem, definitely go ahead and do so. Once we hit 16,000 subscribers on YouTube, I'll be giving away the Spellground, the Player's Choice collaboration. Then on Twitter, once we hit 2,000, I'll be giving away the Ghost Trick playmat from Pyramid. So I hope that everyone has a great time in this discussion, and let's hop right into the first topic. So the first thing I want to talk about today is going to be surprise unlimits, cards that got pulled off the ban list that you were particularly surprised about. So for me, I was definitely going to say Solemn Warning. This is a card that we used to see being very prevalent in the format. It was at 1 for a very long time. Then it went to 3 very randomly, and it's kind of like, was it too late? Was it not too late? It's definitely interesting, but when it went to 3, it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, like, is that actually going to do something here? So it's an interesting thing whenever you get like the surprise unlimits.
For me personally, it would be a very recent thing, like the Satella Knight Ptolemaeus, which just came back, or is coming back in a couple of days. And back in the day, that card was crazy, and I really am looking forward to see whether that card is having any impact on the current meta game. And I could see it having an impact, actually, because there are a lot of decks which could throw down multiple level 4 monsters. So I'm really excited to see whether it will be hitting the meta or not.
Yeah, Ptolemaeus for me too, because I played when that card was really broken, and where you were making Infinity, and I even played 2 just so I can make Pleiades as well. So that card's just way too overpowered. And then with the Warning thing, I think Warning would definitely become relevant eventually in the side deck, just because it's one of the only cards that does what it does.
I guess since we're all going to talk about Ptolemaeus, I guess I'll bring it up too. I have never played in a format with Ptolemaeus. We weren't in the game when it was ever legal for any reason. So like more excited. I'm more or equally excited as other people because I've never played with it. I don't know the actual potential of this card in upcoming formats, but being that Kshatrila is sneaking up and it's a pretty strong card, I think we have some shenanigans on our hand against.
I think for me, the one card that like really struck me when I saw it was probably Yata-Garasu, which is just like it's a strange one because like if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Yata was like one of the main reasons we have a ban list in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like it can stay on the ban list or it can't come off. I don't really think it makes a general difference where it is right now in today's metagame, but it almost is like history, and it's like it was like the first card that like it was the origin of the ban list. And I would have liked to see it stay on just for that reason because it's like history instead. But the fact that it's off and it's not really seeing any play, I thought was a little surprising. But I guess you could also make the argument that you wouldn't really see a card from like 1804 being played anyway. So.
But now he's a Starlight.
But now he's a Starlight, so
now he's immortalized, sweet glitter baby.
Yeah, there's always a lot of really interesting ones. There's also like the surprise limits that happened too, like back when we got snow again. Everyone's like, it was probably my favorite thing. Everyone's like, I remember what this card did, and I don't think it's gonna do like anything healthy for the game right now.
Or like when Dryden came back for like one format, that was just so they could print it in max gold and be like, here's Dryden, smile, and then they're like, oh, just kidding, DP is a card, we're banning it, bye. Like I'm like, no.
So we were talking a bit about Ptolemaeus too, and the fact that even that card can go up into cards like Diamond, which is very strong. That card's insane. The bigger argument for me is Ptolemaeus going to be that relevant to go into things like Diamond when Dweller is still around?
Yeah, very good question because they're very similar. But maybe there are decks that could probably put out both of them to maybe avoid like single spot negations such as Herald of the Orange Light, which is of course going to 1 now, but there are other cards which are specifically targeting 1 card, so Imperm or something. So for example, the Pendulum deck could just put out both, and that should be enough versus Tier most of the time. So I can see it being played for sure.
Yeah, I would just say the extra deck for Tier is really tight, and then I mean, you kind of only need one floodgate for your end board, so you have the one floodgate, and then you probably want Beatrice most of all to complement that floodgate. So I think Ptolemaeus will become broken eventually, but I don't see it being like as broken in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just had to pull it up, as Logan said earlier.
Never played with this card. We're honestly super novice about this, so I'm not trying to say anything I don't know.
We started playing at the very tail end of 2019 and then the very beginning of 2020. So the funny part is we actually have a bunch of these ultis just for the sake of collecting. I've never read this card before. I kind of agree with Tommy that I really think that at the end of the day, you just need a floodgate, one floodgate, and then a bunch of backup for it. I feel like sometimes when you're building your board, I think there's, at least in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh, there's the difference between committing to a board and over committing to a board. And I guess for me, as someone who's never played with this card, I'd have to sit down and I'm a physical learner. I need to have the cards in hand and play. DB's great, Master Duel, all that stuff is really awesome. And I am a physical learner. I need to have the cards and feel it out and all that stuff. So I guess for me, I would love to find out personally if this is committing to the board or if a card like this is over committing to it.
I think what's really interesting, I'm not going to say anything specific about Ptolemaeus because I've never used it and I don't want to sound ignorant. But I do think it's interesting that it feels like as I've played the game over the last 3 years that we are just getting so many powerful, generic 2 level 4 Ggez monsters. It feels like that's becoming such a strong standard in extra decks now. We have, we have Bagooska, we have Dweller, we have so many cards that are so strong and so generic, and I'm just they're really just letting them run free, and I don't know if they're intending on hitting Dweller in the future or what that's going to look like or whatever, but the amount of generic rank 4s we have is just very unnerving for me.
I mean, we also still have Exciton Knight too. That card's pretty cool.
Yeah, that card's pretty great.
I mean, what really makes it ridiculous too is just Tyr can search Solemn Judgment. The line of floodgate is just so much better, and you just have droplets as an answer, but you need a trap for that, so it's rough.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things that Tyr can pull off right now. But so kind of leaning into the next topic with that too, are E-bans necessary? So we've only seen a couple. And so this is going to be our third one now. Again, the argument if you want to call it an emergency ban list or not. But this is just one of those things where we're seeing a list at a time when we don't exactly need or think that we are going to get a list, right? So do you think that the E-bans are necessary? And then do you feel like this E-ban list is going to change the format a lot? Or do you think that it's going to be less impactful?
So first things first, for me personally, it's not an E-list at all. I think when there's no set date, then there cannot be an E-list because it's just a regular list to me. But I think in general, we also do not need any E-lists anymore because we have products releasing in such short time nowadays, and we are releasing so many great cards, and all of them raise the power level of the game by itself. So we are releasing a new set, and we basically have a new metagame already. So why do we need an E-list in between when we are already getting new cards in a couple of months, and we are already getting new decks coming into the format? So I don't think we need them, and also I don't think the list we just got will have an immediate emergency impact on the format because Shizu is just going to be the best deck still, in my opinion, and it will not be contended until we get Photon Hypernova, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it presents just a bad image to emergency ban because it's you're printing these cards. Do you know if you're printing a card that's Rhoda and Raigeki Break and an attack boost in one card, obviously it's going to be really good. So what's the point of E-banning? I think E-banning would be better for a really old card that everyone forgot about, and then just as utilized broken, you might need it there. And then seeing Macrocosmos on the screen just reminds me of just that Yu-Gi-Oh's changed so much because one of the most impactful ban lists I remember back in the day was Pat wrote this article, and it was basically just saying how floodgates are just not that good, right? Or not good for the game. And then Konami did this huge ban list following that article, hit all the floodgates, put bottomless to 1, just hit all the traps, and now I haven't really seen that since. So
hey, this last list didn't give me emergency vibes, which I think a lot of us felt, and I actually said this half jokingly in our ban list video, but I think I actually said something mildly intelligent unintentionally, but I said it does feel like the game is moving faster than the ban lists, not in a negative connotation, but in the way that like you said, we're getting so much product so fast that it's almost like the ban list isn't like changing the meta, the sets are changing the meta for us. Like everything is being done through the product, which I think is great, because I think that's a good thing. It means the product is actually doing something meaningful for the player base and the way that the game is moving. And like sometimes it doesn't feel like a healthy rate, because it's like, oh my god, like between the last 4 YCSs we've had literally 4 completely different formats. And like while that seems really jarring to maybe the non-competitive player base or those who are not super into the game, I think it's really cool, because it allows us to not have to freak out every couple months being like, oh my god, this format's so stale, I need a ban list, what am I doing? Like we're not sitting around, we're like, oh, we have Darkwing Blast, oh, we have Magnificent Mavens, oh, we have Photon Hypernova. Like we have all these things to look forward to that are going to completely warp the way the game is played. So I don't think this was an emergency ban list in any right, and I think they kind of knew that the format was going to shape itself out. So doing a couple little hits, a couple little unlimits, I think felt really strange because of what we are so conditioned to. But I also think that's not a bad type of thing to start leaning into a lot more. I think it's just something that the player base needs to adjust to.
Yeah, and I think I kind of like piggyback off of that. I think for us too, especially like coming in at the later half of 2019, early 2020, we played almost the entirety of the Eternal format. And I think for us, that was a really like molding process for us as players and just like content creators and all that stuff in general. Because like, if we can be honest, we got a ton of ban lists, but it didn't really feel like those ban lists did a lot. And the product, as great as it was, it didn't switch up the top 4 decks for almost the course of a year. And I think, for me, I was kind of, maybe this is just like a personal thing, but I always feel like it's more perspective than it is the actual ban list. Like you can get a ban list and you can have the perspective of, this is horrible, I don't want to play this game, blah, 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 blah. Or you can have the perspective of, well, at least we got something, and I'm really excited to see what these changes can be. It challenges me as a deck builder, it challenges me as a player, it challenges me as a competitive or even a casual player, because whether you feel like the format has changed or not, Konami has implemented something new and something fresh, and I think that's really cool, especially once again, coming off of the beginning of our Yu-Gi-Oh career, so to speak, being the Eternal format and not feeling like we had a different format for a year. I can say that like whether this was an emergency or whether this wasn't an emergency, it was cards that came off that are going to, you will at least see these cards and you will at least feel an impact. So whether the format changes or not, I think that is somewhat perspective.
Cool that the format no longer depends on the ban list. I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, I just like that we no longer rely on the ban list to make the format, and I think that's cool. That's it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I heard somebody say this before. They were like, Magnemite kind of was the ban list, and I was like, that's kind of true. And there's a couple cards that came out, even like POTE, that were like so crazy, because like we knew that coming into this format, that it was just like, wow, this is gonna be kind of insane. And like that's kind of my own thought process going into like the cashier format that we're about to have, where I'm like, this is also going to be insane. And so like when we get ban lists like this, especially if it was a little bit even on the earlier side, I think that it's a lot more refreshing, because if we're sitting here just kind of waiting on a ban list, and then again the drag of just being like, oh, this format's going on forever, or like there's no big changes, like seeing even slight changes here and there, I think it's really interesting, because now even with these floodgates in the format, which I mean, not everyone's always a huge fan of floodgates because floodgate, but looking even at macro defissure in a deck like Flunder. So I've had a lot of conversations with people, because I have a couple of regionals coming up, about like macro and defissure, and should we be worried about this as like tier players? And it's interesting, because even Flanders has a really bad problem with breaking, and they play every consistency card under the sun to be able to see combo. And so let's say that you're playing macro and defissure, your ability to break now is insane. And so even if you're just playing 3 defissure, like you're pulling out 3 very good cards in your deck just to make sure that like you see some kind of floodgate that your deck's not already putting up. Because looking at, you have Empen that's not a starter, you have Statue that's not a starter, the Traps not a starter. Like there's so many different things in the deck that just can break inherently. And as scary as Flanders is, I don't really know if these cards are going to be the craziest in the deck, because they can't really abuse them that well.
And if they are, I would like, once again, just to come back to like to my point of like deck building, I'd be really interested to see like what cards the Fluke players choose to cut. what cards that, you know, do they choose to play all 6? Are they playing 3? Are they playing 2 and 2, 3 and 1? Like, I find that aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like really, really fascinating. I think it's really cool.
For sure, I agree. Just seeing somebody have to make choices, have to make decisions on how to build this deck. Change is coming. I think that just has to be a positive thing. So I definitely agree, for sure.
I like when you consider more multiples, because these cards are just like worse shifters, right? So like, do I want to play more worse shifters or not? Like, people played like 7 tools back in the day with wiretap, you know, just to have more wiretaps. And I mean, at least Mystic Mind's ban, like, this ban list was lit to me, because it's just like, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, Mystic Mind, I was so happy too. And so for one big reason is because, like, they didn't limit it, and I was so happy.
Oh, can you imagine?
If it was limited, that would have been the worst format ever.
Oh,
no, 100%.
So
100%.
no, so like, yeah, I'm glad they finally did away with it. Though it feels so strange now because we've become so used to it after 3 years. We're like, oh, haha, is Mystic Mind gonna get hit? No, great, and it's like, oh, okay.
It's refreshing. It's refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. I remember there was one tournament that I was playing in, and I had went through everything I needed to go through, played through the whole board. My opponent had 1 card left in hand, and I had to pass to them. And I was like, all right, so what can I do to make sure that I don't just randomly lose? Because I feel like that's going to be a mine. Like, they're playing way too confident right now for that not to be a mine. So I just started doing my combo. I milled like 10 cards, and then I eventually hit Galaxy Cyclone, and I just wasted so many cards on my board just to mill out like half my deck. Hit Galaxy Cyclone and passed. My opponent activated mine. I was like, okay. This is like Galaxy like pop. It was the best. So it's so nice to not have to play around that anymore.
Yeah.
So talking about a lot of very fun cards in the game right now, and cards that need to be banned, cards that could or should be banned. What is everyone's opinion on Bagooska and Dweller?
See, that really depends on what deck we're playing.
Yeah.
For sure that. But I think also, like, Abyss Dweller right now is being summoned very regularly as a standard part of your combo in your turn 1 board. And Bagooska basically never is. So I think I would definitely divide between the two of them, because you're never just building your combo board and put Bagooska on top of it just to just to make the rest of your combo board not good anymore. So I think Dweller is definitely way more problematic than Bagooska, because it's just going to be the floodgate you're always going to go for. And Bagooska is very situational, and it's just going to be something you use when you get stopped by your opponent in a certain way, for example, when you get de-shifted. So I think Dweller in general is way more problematic, and Bagooska I personally don't see as a card that has to hit the list in any way.
Bagooska is really interesting because, like you said, it's only if you get interrupted or if something happens that kind of stuns or stalls your turn, and you're like, well, donk Bagooska. But it also kind of gives me like flashbacks when you said that to Verte, because it's like, oh, there's 2 monsters on the board. You stop my turn. I'm just gonna make Verte, and like it gives me that kind of vibe. I don't think it's nearly as problematic as Verte, but at the same time, it's like the wording, and I'm like, oh god, you're starting to give me the Verte twitches, like. So, like, I don't think it deserves, like, an E-ban or anything like that. But it's definitely, it feels weird. Because it's like, you know that if you stall their turn or stump them or, like, interrupt them, they're just going to make Bagooska. But at the same time, like, what are you going to do? Like, make them make other things that aren't Bagooska and have full combos? So it's, like, a really weird... I hate it, but I'm not going to complain about it, I guess. I think Dweller is infinitely stronger. Like, 100%. 100%.
Oh, you de-shifted me? Here's this Bagooska. I'm a pass.
Smile.
Take it.
Yeah, I mean, like Lampi said, it's basically just like a shifter out game 1. Game 3, I can understand how it could be problematic for Flunder, because, like, if I brick and I just can make 2 level 4s into a floodgate, floodgates are usually, like, not fun. And then with Dweller, I mean, I think Dweller was banned. It'd probably be, like, one of the best formats ever, just because it's just too broken in the mirror and then does nothing versus the other decks. So it's just like a weird blind card that you have to make that's not intricate in the mirror, so it doesn't really like promote healthy gameplay in the mirror. But I think, I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Always takes like natural cycles where like you'll have like a 6 to 7 deck format, like, you know, Hat or like our last Nationals, and then you enter this tier 0 format. But in the past, tier 0 formats haven't really had a floodgate like, you know, Dweller, just that's so generic, you can just make at any time. So I definitely wish Dweller got banned. I think it would have just been so insane. But it does help with the time mechanic, because, you know, tier mirrors can take very long. But that's one reason why I love like Bagooska a lot too, because there's intricate game states with the tier mirror where you'll have like 5 monsters, or your opponent will have 5 monsters, and like Bagooska is like the only way you can like slow things down in the mirror. So I think like Bagooska does have like purposes that are like really fun to play against, because you really have to when they summon the Bagooska, you're like, how do I use my links? And that's one reason I was even considering putting Unicorn in my tier deck. So
yeah, in a weird way, it is a floodgate monster, but it leads to very interactive situations because you have to come up with weird ways to actually deal with it. But I think it's absolutely not problematic right now, especially because we have Druid Swarm in the format, basically being in every deck. So you just link away Druid Swarm and you can just pop the Bagooska, and it's not a problem at all.
Druid is so good.
Me personally, like as I said before, like a lot of it is perspective. We came into the game playing like a lot of rogue decks. I think we still really love rogue decks. We have a ton of rogue decks that we enjoy playing. One of my favorites is Zombies. Logan has, as she mentioned earlier, Zodiac. Just like a bunch of decks that don't have to necessarily be tier 0, but if you build them correctly and you play them optimally, they have a fighting chance. But I think this is our first at least tier 0 format, and it is a very interesting conversation because one part of me wants to make the argument where it's like, man, if you're playing a rogue deck, like Dweller is really kind of your only chance at beating Tier. But then obviously Tier can just make Dweller as like the 4th action. So like in the mirror match, it's like super like it's just really frustrating to have to go against that. And like we talked about, I know that, it's not necessarily a floodgate, but like having to play around all these layers of interaction, like not only the, the Bagooska, not only the Dweller, but like playing around, it used to be 4 and now it looks like the standard is like 7 to 9 Bystials as well. Having to like think about that as you're going through your combo line and like making sure that you're layering your combos to the point where like if you get interrupted, yes, you have that fallback that is Bagooska, but you also want to make sure that like, I think for me, when I'm playing, I just picked up Tier like a couple weeks ago. We were both on Sprite, and it's just it's unfortunate, but it is one of those formats where like you are not seeing a lot of success if you are not playing Tier. And like I think the competitive nature, I just wanted to play better. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be a better player. Yeah, I wanted to win. I wanted to, and I do think being a player for the first time in like a Tier 0 format, it's something that I really wanted to experience all the way. So picked up Tier, been learning Tier, and I think that, Dweller is just ridiculous. Dweller is like, it feels unfair, 100%. And like, we filmed Jesse's profile in Niagara when he got 2nd place, and he's like, yeah, Dweller needs to be banned. Dweller needs to be banned. And we were like, dude, you're crazy. Dweller is like,
but now that we're here, I'm like,
but now that we're playing, now that I'm playing it, and like my opponent sets up a Dweller, I'm like, oh, let's just go to the next game. Like, it's not even. So I definitely see like both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
But having the ability to play against any other deck that's not Tier and still be able to make Bagooska through like layers of interaction.
It's pretty good.
Yes, it's floodgates. Yeah. Floodgates.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because if you look at Tier in general, now I've been playing Tier for a minute, like since it was, like released. And it's interesting to see how it's been taken along to like through the ban list and like through different iterations of the deck and whatnot. And it's really crazy to think that there's a deck out there that if you don't make Dweller before you try and like Zeus the board, even if you Zeus them for like 8 or 9 cards, right? Like let's say that you hit them a whole board, like their whole board's just going to get complete value in the graveyard.
Yep.
And it's like, there's so little that you can actually do to a full board unless it's exactly Dweller Zeus. And it's pretty crazy. Especially like, I'm really surprised that Havness didn't get limited, because like
welcome to my world, bud.
that card's
Logan's big point there.
Oh, that's all I wanted. That was it. That could have been the only thing, and I'd be like,
I like Havness.
Yeah, like
yeah, I'm sure you do.
that card's
I feel like
really
that's
crazy.
one reason people play 40 card lists now again, because it's just like now my hand trap's so much more broken.
Yeah.
And I think like the biggest thing for me about like playing Tier and like why I feel like the deck is so crazy, right, is coming back to like what Tommy said about being able to search Solemn Judgment. Like it's kind of wild when Scything and Gamma doesn't even feel good anymore because they just have Crime Dweller. And it's like, well, that never mattered. So it's...
I also think it's really interesting too that all of the Tier trap cards, not only are they trap cards, but like kind of what was said previously, like they're Rotas. They're like extenders as well, because you have to sand from like hand or field to grave, and it's like part of the effect, so they're extender. It's just like It's really crazy.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you got inconvenienced here. Let's fix that.
Like, can you imagine back in 2019 if like Crescendo was also just like
a Roto?
it was just it was
Yeah,
Roto, but
it was
like,
actually a Roto.
yeah, it's crazy.
But more.
Yeah,
But that roto was like
Crescendo,
super
links them in the
restricted.
Galatea under
Yeah, it was a
100%.
super restrictive roto. It was nowhere like every single tier
Yeah.
card, which does everything. Like, it feels like Scream, Solic, everything does everything all the time. Whereas like one Crescendo, I'm like, I just can't compare. Like,
So I know that we're gonna get to the conversation of is tier that good here in a little bit, but I have a question for everyone. It's more just like a mind-blowing thing. Isn't it crazy how the one trap that we don't play is a Book of Moon and a Foolish Burial, and it's considered bad?
just tier 0 things, you know.
Good old meta noise, yeah. People have been playing that at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
card's
at the
insane.
very beginning, people
Was
were
the
playing
one.
it.
Yep.
But now, yeah, then we got Crime, and Crime's a little better, I would say, just comparing the two. So I can understand that we're cutting that, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild to me because it also adds back from grave if it's milled. Like, there's so many applications beyond that card that's just like insane, but it's just the worst one.
It just sucks too because if you get rid of the monster, it won't resolve, and then that's like
True.
kind of what's better about Sulik. You know, you get it on the next turn. Like
Yeah.
I've won games, you know, versus Dweller where I just open Sulik going second. Like it's actually been really good.
Yeah, it's really strong. So talking a bit more even into that conversation though of is tier that good, I think that in this conversation it'd probably be the Shuzu cards are very good. Tier by itself is still really insane though, but I feel like if Mudora and Keldo were not in the question right now, like it might be a bit more manageable for quite a few decks.
For sure. The Shizu cards did the trick, definitely. The Shizu cards made the deck tier 0 for sure. Without them, Sprite would probably still be a 50-50 contender, or Runic Sprite specifically, where we do not have to fight versus all the shuffler backs. But the Shizu cards are just so crazy, and I think, yes, the deck is that good, as the slide says, and I think it's very well deserved to be the best deck right now in the format. And still, it's a very enjoyable deck. As we said, it has so many different layers. The trap cards even give you more actions to play against, so you have to plan ahead so much with the deck, and you have to play a deck. You have to play a mind game consistently with your opponent on what he has in terms of Bestias and stuff like that. So I think it is a very, very good deck, but it's still a very enjoyable mirror match to play as well. So I do really enjoy the format right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I read Kakalos, I was like, yo, this is painful choice. And then I read Agito and Kelbeck, and I'm like, these are painful choice too. This is crazy. I just wish the field spell got banned. I mean, that card's just way too good. Especially in the mirror, it's just like so annoying when they have the field spell and you don't. And then you have these two new cards that just trigger the field spell too. So it's like, dang.
Yeah, the amount of people who like when we do like banlist predictions and stuff like that, and we talk about the field spell getting hit, and people legitimately were like heavily disagreeing with us, saying that like everybody, and I'm like, there is no way that y'all just think that the field spell is just like a chill the way it is. Like
So
I was
unfair.
like having this to one,
Yeah.
hit the field spell. We don't have to do all that, but if we could do any variation of that, I'd be cool. They're like, no, what? You're gonna hit a field spell? And I'm like. Meanwhile, the same people being like Mystic Mine, and I'm like, well, you want Mystic Mine banned, which is a field spell, but like we can't hit the also very oppressive field spell in the tier 0 deck. And I'm like,
The
if they're just
Rhoda,
like, why
the
would we
quick
hit the
effect
field spell?
pop, the
Oh my
attack
goodness.
boost for not only
I
archetypes
thought
but fusions.
I'm so glad that because I'm like, there's no way I'm just in this bubble where I'm like, surely the field spell should have gotten hit. So I just really needed that validation. So thank you.
I think it's really difficult because once again, like perspective, and I think like I don't know if you guys get this a lot, but like from people who make content, you know, multiple times a week, and we interact with our comment section all the time. We interact with, you know, our Twitch, our Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. It is very polarizing on people that are like, I want every card in this archetype banned, or like I want absolutely zero cards in this archetype banned. It's like, okay, well, who's the tier player, who's not the tier player?
Yeah, they were like, oh, you hit the field spell, you kill the deck, and I'm like.
Absolutely.
And I think
I'm like, okay.
and I think it's very evident to tell here who's the tier player and who's not the tier player.
Well, like, it's not even that. Like, I'm not the tier player. Well, I'm gonna be the tier player in about 48 hours. But like, I haven't been. I'm learning the deck. I don't feel qualified. But like, I respect the deck and I understand how it works, and I can respect which cards are extremely good and still believe the deck should be hit, but not also nerfed. Like,
I think to Tommy's point, where like you are at such an advantageous spot if you have the field spell and your opponent doesn't.
For sure.
True.
Just because of, like, the amount of advantage that it generates and the amount of, like, as we, you know, back on topic with the Ishizu cards, just the ability to trigger those cards as quick effects whenever you want to shuffle back anything. You don't have to fusion with them. You don't have to, like, mill anything. Like, you literally just have to shuffle back to trigger the field spell. It was a Mystic Mine out, you know, it still is for 2 days. It was a Mystic Mine out. It was, you know, it was basically an out to any Floodgate. It's just a very, very powerful card. And I think it comes down to, if you are a fan of the Tier 0 format and if you are a fan of the tier match or the tier mirror match or your tier opponents or whatever, do you think that the deck is balanced, or are we at the point where, you know, the deck has been out? I made the argument in one of our banlist videos where Sprite, yes, they didn't hit the engine, but Sprite was playable for like 3 weeks and they took Ronin Totem away from the deck. And, like, realistically, as a previous Sprite player, that hit hurt. That hit really hurt the deck. Like, it genuinely hurt the deck. And to not hit tier basically at all, and then, like, to hit Curious, it was just like really, it's just like, it's so far. As Logan said, like,
again,
it's
like,
not
the
a bad
formats
hit.
are
It's just
moving
the
faster.
format is so fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think the field spell should have gone to 1. I feel like Hoffman's could have gone to 1. I think bringing the consistency down. I was on the fence about banning Dweller or any of that stuff, but I do think it's at the point where my point is, having all this interaction with so many different perspectives in the community, I think it's really interesting to see that people really enjoy Tier 0 or people really despise Tier 0. I don't think there's, like, an in-between.
For sure.
Like, this is a very polarizing place for us to be. And, like, to interact with the people who really enjoy it, and, like, to interact with the people who really hate it, and, like, to have our own opinions and, like, try to mitigate that. It's a really interesting
100%.
spot.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, like, I am an advocate for chaos, and I'm very interested in seeing how the format plays out because I want to experience it at its full potential. So I'm kind of glad that they didn't hit anything because I kind of want to I just want to watch stuff unfold. I'm just, like, watching with my little pitchfork all excited. But, like, yes, I've been very frustrated, like, with the game in the last few months with tier, like, getting stronger and stronger, but I'm so not going to try my hardest to just enjoy it, and I'm still gonna I'm gonna play the deck and I'm gonna live it up and have fun. But I do kind of enjoy the fact that they're not stopping it because I just kind of want to.
I mean, it's so hard to hit too because I mean, even if you made those hits you mentioned, it's like Merly's still a level 2 Aqua that is, like, insane with the Sprite package and Angler. If you have Sprite, like, just never stops.
Yeah,
that's the difficult part, is that they make everything so generic. And I think, for me, why I think the deck is 2-0 isn't, you know, not only is it the fact that they can play Elf, that they can play Sprint. You know, you look at LeBlanc's list. LeBlanc was even playing, you know, Gigantic to summon a bunch of, like, other Floodgates, like Ibly and stuff like that. Yeah. It's just, like, the synergy is it's really cool. And it's like, oh my god, what variant am I playing against? What do I have to play around? And then on top of that, like, the effect, it almost feels sometimes, and I don't think they do have too many, but it does feel like sometimes when you are at the disadvantage already, it feels like the card effects have sometimes a few too many effects. Like, the fact that the Millers are also, like, Compulses and Rotas, it's like, wow.
Just kicking me while I'm down.
That's a really good card you got there, bud.
It's when you're playing it, not on the receiving end.
See, and that's how I felt about Scream too. It's just like, whenever I see a card with 3 effects, I'm like, listen, like, this card's insane.
Yeah.
So
and I think people pick up on that, right? Scream is just getting more and more popular. At the beginning, it wasn't that crazy, but now Jesse also really pressured it in his first place list deck profile. That's basically the best card of the deck right now. So I think people are really getting to it.
Yeah. So with tier, I feel like the deck just is that good in general, and the reason why I feel like it's that good, even without the Ishizu cards, is because no matter, like, what happens to the deck, as we were just talking about with, like, being able to play the Sprite cards and whatnot, like, there's just so many engines and possibilities out there to make sure that the deck just lives. And so I was talking about this with a lot of people too, and it's like, this is probably gonna be the new BA. It's like, the deck has such a way to just mold and just create a new list. Like, even if you talk about, like, the new Dark World cards and, like, the new Field Spell, you can Field Spell Dump King of the Swamp, summon the new Dark Lord Fusion. And so, like, there are different ways you can play, like, the Patchwork still, and, like, different things you can just do with the deck. like most of the cards, even the field spell having 3 effects. Any single time I see a card with 3 effects, I'm like, this is pretty good. And so like we're getting a brand new Havness even. Like even if they did hit Havness, we're getting a brand new one that you don't even have to wait for your opponent to proc. Like you can just proc it on your own, which is crazy. And then it's a free 7 on the board. And so if you're playing like Heshira with it, then you just get to summon token generators like Dracozak. Like there's just so many different things that you can do that I think are insane. And so like the deck's gonna be around for a really long time.
I'm a fan, genuinely. Like, we put up a zombie version. Zombies is like my favorite deck in the whole. That's like the deck that got me into the game. But like the fact that you can you just have a bunch of these new cards now that can like Shira that can get these brickier cards like Mizuki or any of these things out of your hand, or like mill a bunch of cards and then have the ability to like dump Scythe with Diviner, modulate levels with cards like Unizombie to make additional synchro plays, like Scythe block your opponent, have the ability to like search Zombie World like most decks are doing regardless. But like it just like there's so many utility cards that function in the graveyard. Like I just think I don't know, it's frustrating, but it's so cool to see the opportunity and the potential that the like formats to come have.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so we're talking a lot about the different decks that you can play as well. And I've noticed in particular on the DB ladder lately, there's been one underdog deck in particular that's really been showing up, and that's Goaty. Goaty's actually been pretty prevalent on the ladder, especially toward the top. Has anyone played against a lot of Goaty yet, or have heard anything about it for the new format?
I know this card makes Baron with T-Bow. That's what I remember from it.
Is it pure Goaty or is it paired together with Sprite cards?
It's been like, as far as I've seen, it's been like Runic Goaty. And they've just been trying to turbo out like the Zero Boros on your opponent's turn.
Ah, I see.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't played against the deck or anything. I also don't play on DB hardly at all, but I think the deck is super cool. I like the style of it a lot, and I like the mechanic, but like, I've never played against it. I've seen like a couple replays, but I don't know the potential of the deck, and I don't really know if it's actually going to be able to hold up or do anything, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, summoning Zero Boros when your opponent's not expecting it sounds pretty lit.
Yeah,
for
and
sure. I love doing gimmicks
is,
like that.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, it's like a shtick deck, you know. It's got its fun little thing it can do, and will it be able to actually hold up and really maintain? Like, it's a cheese deck. I like it. It's cute. Fish.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention it though, because I've heard a lot about it lately, and usually whenever I hear a lot about things, I'll bring it on the podcast and just have a nice little conversation about it. But it's definitely it's an interesting deck. I've never played against it in tourney, but I'm definitely curious to know if it's going to come up at the regionals this weekend or not.
Yeah, like a left field deck that, like, if you're not expecting it or prepared for it, because you don't, like, let's be honest, if someone shows up next to you playing like Fish, you're gonna be like, what? I gotta read everything, and then you're reading all the cards, and they're like, activate, and I'm like, wait, hang on, oh my god, the aquarium's full. Like, and like you get overwhelmed, and like that's kind of how they catch you with like the whole shtick thing, and it's like, oh, surprise, zero.
Yeah, this could be Rika 2.0. Just nobody knew what Rika cards were doing, and then it won Euros.
Yes.
We like starting the game being rogue players. I think that's what we liked about it so much, is that like no one knew what your cards did, and like even though you were playing the worst deck, you had the upper hand because your opponent had no.
For a minute. Game one, yeah.
That's what I love about Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just like you can have a interaction that kind of sucks, but because people don't know about it or how it works, it's just completely broken.
Yeah.
That was me with Guru opening weekend.
It's a real strategy. Like, sometimes you gotta just make your opponent read cards, and it throws their whole game off. Like.
So, talking about a different deck that I've heard a lot more buzz about, being the Leary Tri or Sprite Tri. How do we feel like this deck's gonna fare in the format? Because I feel like Tri Brigade is one of those decks that, like, it just has always such a potential. Even back when it was considered like the best deck of the format, right? And it just always was popping in and out. We've seen it in YCSs here and there where it'll like take a spot. Now with the second recital, and then we also have the third Tenki, do we think that's actually going to change anything for the deck?
I was so hyped when I saw Recital coming back to 2, because when this deck was the best deck, Lyric's Cry, I loved to play it because it was such a flexible deck. Of course, you had your standard combo of green and brown, but you could also find very much different ways to get to your end board, and it was a really, really great end board in terms of combo potential. But I think now without the Seamorg, which was a crucial part of your end board back in the day, and this card is still on the list, I feel like it's still a bit lackluster. I think you can build cool boards, and you can definitely go for F-Zero now a lot more on and then the Draco Future, because you do have double Recital, but I think, is the ceiling of the deck still good enough in nowadays Ishizu tier formats, because what is the ceiling of the deck? It's probably like Appaloosa, F-Zero, Draco Future, Revolt, and a double Dragon Lords, something like that. And I feel like that's not the end of the world, and I feel like you could play through this with Engine with an Ishizu tier deck. So I think it's going to have a hard time, but it could catch some people off guard.
Yeah, and like Revolt versus Keldo is kind of crazy unless those cards are banished instead. Yeah. That happened to me at a tournament the other day. Somebody flipped Revolt on me, and I was like, Keldo? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, they're definitely going back to deck. It was just, it was wild.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like it's in a weird place, because like the Ishizu cards, you know, shuffling things back and like basically ripping your graveyard from you is super problematic, especially with like the Tri-Engine, and like it's weird. Like it could maybe sneak up and do well in a couple things here and there. I don't think it's actually gonna like contend really in like the meta as like a large portion or anything like that. But like I don't know. The ceiling just doesn't feel as good. I don't know. It just sucks. But like I just feel like tier's really good.
Well, yeah, I mean that's just what sucks. It's just like the Ishizu cards are best utilized by tier, and they're just generic broken cards versus most decks like ever made. And then I don't know, I never played Bird Up because I played Sword Soul when it was out, because it was just like too complicated for me coming back to the game. Yeah, like Yu-Gi-Oh now just has so many decks that are just like Dragon Link, where it's just insane combos and so much memory, and I'm like, I just don't want to do that. Like I'd rather play Prank Kids, where like I just do this simple combo.
It might be the same person. That's wild.
Too much.
Yeah, I don't think it's any chance. That's.
I know it feels bad, but like it feels bad because like they bring things off the list to give you like hope for like a minute, and like
maybe in like 8 months when we get like 3 more lists.
Yep, that's usually I keep in mind. I'm like, yo, 3 more lists. This could be really good.
Like in 3 big lists, like when these cards, like when the Ishizu and the tier cards are all like limited or semi-limited, and like
give me a year.
Yeah, like it's a. I think right now it's a cool rogue deck. But then like once again, like it's what are we gonna get in product in the next 6 to 8 months that's gonna not make it tier 1 again anyway?
I don't know. I think Tri Brigade Scareclaw is really fun, but I mean, Tri Brigade deck. I think Scareclaw Tri Brigade. I think that deck puts up more though, like of a fight. I don't know. I think it's cool. I'm just coping over here. I'm sorry, it's the cope over. I like Tri Scareclaw.
Well, if anyone would like to cope with me and Sir Eminon, we are putting out a massive video behind this deck. So if you guys are looking forward to that, it'll be out soon.
Let's go.
Cool.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So the last thing I want to talk about today is actually going to be a really big one. Dark World is a pretty crazy idea moving into this format. I don't know if it's going to be as crazy as it was before because of Keldo Mudora on Grapha, or like Abyssal on Grapha. But it's like the deck itself did so much, but like now can it do as much as it did? That's going to be the biggest question.
Yeah. It's kind of ironical that the deck itself is releasing on the same day than the list, and the Macrocosmos and Defager are going to free versus the deck that's completely relying on the graveyard.
And let's not forget about Dweller.
They're like, oh, you want this structure deck? That's great. Also, here's the ban list.
Yeah. But still, at the end of the day, I think it's very promising in general. I think the new Dark World cards that are coming out are really, really good. And I mean, they have been anticipated for multiple months now. So people were, when those cards were revealed, really hyped about them. And I think rightfully so. They definitely give a new dimension to the deck. I don't know whether it's going to be Dark World 2.0 in the sense of it being really meta relevant again. But I think it's going to definitely try. I think people always are very hyped about trying out new stuff. So I think the Bird Up deck will not see that much play because people have already toyed around with that. But now Dark World with the new cards, I think people might be really interested in that. And people might really be playing that and try to figure out what's the best way to play this. And I would love to join them for sure. But it seems like an enjoyable deck, definitely.
Yeah, I love Dark Worlds. I mean, Dark Worlds are probably like one of my favorite archetypes. Right. Shout out to Dark World Mofo from back in the day, yo. But I mean, Dark Worlds really never got a chance to like shine too, because it was during like Tengu plant format, which kind of sucks. So they never. I topped my first like Dragon Duel when I was like 12. I played. I bought 3 of the structure decks and then just put 3 Skill Drain in the deck, and I just like tore it up. So I really like Dark Worlds, but I just don't think they're like gonna be that strong, unfortunately. I wish they were like good enough to like win an event, because I love when they bring back like old decks and just make them like way better, and you still have to use some of those old cards.
Yep. Yeah, it feels like this was not the format to be bringing it back, which is like super unfortunate because, you know, I mean, I don't know to the extent that which they plan and coordinate all this, but like this format for it feels kind of rough. Like I'm like on top of the ban list and the cards that were just let off the ban list. It's like it feels like this deck has so much cool potential, and like we're gonna update it. And we love Dark Worlds as well. I feel like everyone kind of I feel like Dark Worlds is one of those decks that, like,
it's definitely a really fun deck.
Hard Destruction was the best feeling.
Yes.
It's so rad, and like it doesn't feel like it's gonna get to shine the way it should. Like especially like just this format, it's just not happening. But again, like who knows in a format or 2 or 3 or 5, maybe something could happen. But I still think people will be very excited to build and play this deck, whether it does well or not. Like I think this is a deck that is casual and like competitive alluring, because like the competitive players all know about everyone knows this, everyone knows Dark World, everybody. So like it just is a unifying thing. Whether it's going to be really good, definitely a debatable topic, but I think it's going to do well just on the fact that people will want to enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those. It kind of hits it checks every box, right? Like it can be casual, it can be competitive, and it's nostalgic. And I think that's kind of where this deck lies for me. Is it's a really cool nostalgic deck. Even though we weren't around like when it was like at its peak, it got a structure deck reprint when we first started getting back into the game, and now it's getting another structure deck reprint, but it has new additional cards.
Revamping.
I think like, is it going to be meta viable? I think any deck that's going to be meta viable has to check the box of like, can you beat Shifter? Can you beat Dweller? Can you beat like Macro Deep Vision? And like if or like can you beat the Ishizu cards? And if the answer is no, it's like if you can't beat them, join them. So
I want to play it so bad too, just because like you know the alties look so fresh. This is probably like one of the most like the nicest looking decks when it's max rarity. It's so insane.
So
all that
old alti too. They like just shine so much more. Yeah,
like the brows. Oh my god.
Moral of the story is GX is the best season and Tier is the best deck.
Yes, yo, GX is the best.
I just remember the season when he's like fighting the Dark World monsters, and it was so cool because I was like, damn, like this is sick, you know. So like just watching GX in general and just like coming back and like seeing the deck again, like I don't know. I guess that's what really does it for me with Dark World, is just like thinking back to like everything that happened in that show.
Is that nostalgia? Is that nostalgia for you?
Yeah,
it works.
That graph was like huge.
And also it's a structure deck, right? So it will be super cheap, so everybody will have access to it. So that's just the perfect product for a lot of the casuals as well.
It's a very strong, perfect product.
And they printed like really good reprints in this too.
True. Jackalope was crazy expensive, and now it's just in there, right?
Tsuchinoko, like.
I know deck Devi's in it. I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, there's I know there's like
some
a
good traps.
Needed trap card that was reprinted that was really nice.
Yeah, super strong.
Yeah, Dark World's pretty cool. I don't really know how like insane it's gonna be myself, but it's still like looking back to like Danger Dark World. We'll have to see what it does. Beginning of the end still says draw 3. You know, we'll see.
Oh, I love that card.
Oh, it's such a cool card, dude. I think it's one of my favorite like cards in the game. It's so sick.
The artwork is really.
It's so
Oh yeah,
that's another good ulti.
Another great ulti. That's what I wanted to say. Another great ulti.
Like
for sure.
Well, does anyone have any last thoughts on Tier, on the ban list, on anything right now going on in Yu-Gi-Oh?
Necessarily have like any like thoughts? Maybe just like.
I guess I would just say like, you know, whatever your goal is in Yu-Gi-Oh, just stick to it. So like if you wanna be the one who beats Tier with you know, less played deck, then like just try to find out the best one to do that with. You know, to do something cool that's not Flunder. And then if you want to just like be competitive and win and like get better at the game, I would encourage you to try Tier and not just like try to win the event with Flunder, because you're not really gonna learn any skills, you know, doing that method.
Propaganda, like he's
That's
just
true.
Writing that in there. Yeah,
but
like,
also, go ahead, Logan. Go ahead.
No, okay, sorry, Lampi. I'm like, I just want to encourage everyone to like go into the upcoming format, because we've got a ban list. Things are pretty set in stone at this point. Like, just try to be open-minded. I know that this can be like super frustrating for like people who aren't hyper competitive or people who just aren't into Tier. But try to be open-minded about it. I understand that like the deck is extremely good and it can be very frustrating to play against constantly, but at the same time, like just like it's everything Tommy just said. Like maybe try to play the deck. Maybe try to play something that's not flu that could counter the deck. Or if you're genuinely just not into the competitive format, like maybe just try to have fun and like not play I don't know. I just like, it hurts me to see people say they're dropping the game. Like that makes me so sad because like I don't want people to ever feel like they're at that point where they can't play the game anymore. Which I understand happens in Tier 0 formats. People just are gonna wait until it's over. But at the same time, I feel like this game changes so much and so often and has so much potential with card releases and things that we just don't expect. There's always random texts that come up that we don't know about and like things like that. And I encourage people to stick it out for the long run because it is good for you as a player to, you know, learn new strategies and just improve yourself. If you don't enjoy the best deck or the format, like why don't you take time to actually like work on things you could get better at as a player? Like take that as an opportunity to like hone your skills and things like that for yourself and not, you know, for the game, if anything. But I don't know. I just think people should take it as an opportunity and try to be open-minded, even though it's really hard. But perspective is just the biggest thing.
Yeah, this format is definitely interesting, especially just because Tier 0, and I've been a part of a couple Tier 0s myself, where it's like, it kind of is unfortunate. Like, even if you look at, like, Goki hand rip, like, that was way more unfortunate. And I just always look at, like, there's always worse situations to be in this game, I feel like. And especially this deck alone, I would say try to understand why people think that it's, like, one of the best tier mirrors. Like, one of the best decks to mirror. Because like mirror matches are always really complicated, and I don't think that I've ever heard a negative review on somebody who like really plays tier in the mirror match. Like the mirror match is really interactive, it's super fun, and even if you don't enjoy the deck fully, don't play the deck to like the deck. Play the deck to understand a higher level mirror because that's insane, and that's something that even for me playing Striker back when like Striker was like one of the best decks alone. Playing that mirror match, like even if you didn't like Striker, the amount that you learned from that mirror match was crazy. And it like I carry that around with me to other matchups now in other decks. And like this format, again, it might seem hard because there's a lot of different decks that you want to play, and it might seem like less optimal. But it's still at that point where, like Logan was saying too, if you actually like sit down and you take a lot of time to like look through the database and get really familiar with the cards in the game. And even if you are waiting on this format and you wait till like next format and you really start studying up on the next format, that's one thing that's really cool that you can do. Like, let's say you felt like you were too late on a deck and you don't really want to buy into the deck because you feel like the ban list is going to hit it and you don't really want to get involved with the deck until the next best deck comes out. Study the next best deck that we think is going to be coming. So like, for example, Kashtira. Like, sit down, really learn Kashtira, learn it well, and then when that deck is the best deck, play that deck.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't know if this would be... Or sorry, go on.
Yeah, if one major takeaway is you just got to work for it. You just got to sit down and work. And I think the current format is really showing that to us because we had Hani Jawari, Vincenzo Orofino, and now Jesse Cotton winning YCSs after each other. And they're just all really known to be hard workers in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Just work on their decks, really put in the hours actually practicing. And I think that's a major takeaway. So if you want to really perform well, you got to actually put in the time before the event and not just playing the event. So if you really want to go competitive, definitely put in the work and it will pay off at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know if this would be comforting, but just like understand that it's inevitable that like formats always go through this cycle. So like you said, Goki hand loop, it's like there's wind up hand loop. So it's not just happening to you, it's always happened to someone in the past too.
For sure.
And I mean, just like try to learn from those formats maybe, or just like understand that like there's a reason why players are so consistent. Like, I don't know, what Jesse's done so far, like these recent events is just so insane to me because it's like, it's so hard to be consistent in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I know like certain players who don't cheat at all, and like Jesse's one of those. So it's like people can do this without cheating or doing like anything bad just through like hard work and just like literally understanding the game through like years of experience and like trying new strategies, deck building. Like, you know, some of his decks have been so insane. And it's like, you could do that too if you just like focused on deck building rather than like maybe playing someone like 5 times in a row and not learning anything. You could just like focus on a different thing to build on.
I think it's very easy to just give up. It's very easy to leave a format and say, oh, I'll come back when I care about it, or I'll come back when this deck is unplayable. But I think it takes a lot of dedication and personal commitment to be like, you know what, I'm going to tough it out. I'm going to get better. I'm going to do what I can and like persevere through it, because it's so easy to just drop the game. and hope you can come back and maybe you'll be able to get back into it. But like at that point, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And if you genuinely enjoy the game, like you can take so much inspiration from all these players who are working their butts off and doing phenomenal. Like if they're not giving up, and like you can probably, you know, spare the mental fortitude to try a little. Like don't just drop something. Like that's no way to, even if it's just Yu-Gi-Oh and it's like, well, it's just my fun hobby. Like what? If you care about the game enough to drop it, I think you can care enough to try. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think kind of what, you know, like what Gigi said, my final takeaway is that, you know, you don't want to find yourself in, you know, like a bad scenario. And I've always kind of had the perspective that the worst scenario you can find yourself in is the one that you have mentally put yourself there. If you think that it's going to be a horrible format, there's nobody that's going to talk you out of that than yourself. If you think that it's the best format, you're going to have the best time. I think that like you really need to go into these types of things, kind of what everyone has said too, just like to, you know, close it all out. I think that if you go in with a minor goal, you don't always have to have these gigantic goals.
You don't have to win a YCS.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I'm winning a YCS, or I'm gonna top 2 or top 32, or I'm gonna day 2, whatever. Like those are great goals to have, and I think we should all have those goals. But I think we also need to like realize and recognize the starting blocks of, you know what, maybe this isn't my format and maybe I'm not having the most fun. I can still go back and watch over replays and learn what different lines I could have had. I could work on my deck building skills. I could learn how to trim my deck from 44 to 40 cards and realize what those 4 card differences is and what the math is. And I just think that there's always a learning opportunity if you look to find it. But if you don't look for it and instead you're just looking away, know that that is a choice. And that the only person that's going to pull you out of that rut is yourself. And the only person who's going to allow yourself to get better is you as well. So I think in these formats, it's really challenging, but it's also, for me, it's really inspiring because you can either face this head on and become a better player because you want to be, or you can step down and, you know, come back, which there's nothing wrong with. But I think a lot of people step away because they're scared. And I guess I would encourage you, don't be scared, be excited, because these formats, as difficult as they are, I've only been playing this mirror match for a month, and I think I've learned so much in a month. And like you can apply all the knowledge that you've, you know, gathered throughout the last however long you've been playing to make you a better player throughout the course of your journey too. So.
Yeah, we're all going through it, and it's better to go through it together than to walk away. So
Yeah, and I just want to take a moment and thank you all for joining me today for this episode of the podcast. You know, this podcast has been going on, I believe, 9 episodes now, and it's really awesome to be able to have so many people on the channel and really be able to get everyone's perspectives and just as many groups of people that I can bring on here too to discuss these things, because a lot of these discussions usually just happen in group chats, or they happen kind of just at tournaments, or if there is a big tournament that happens and we see the biggest card in the tournament was like, for say, Bagooska, right, that just won the event, then everyone views it as a problem. It's really nice to actually have like a dialogue about it and be like, well, is it really that big of a problem? Was it just like good for that event? So I really like having these discussions.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
dude, thanks for having us.
Same. Thank you.
I don't talk to people enough, so this is great.
Absolutely.
And subscribe to Gigi. What are you doing if you're not?
For real.
Subscribe to everyone here. Everyone's links will be in the description below. I'm going to close things out now, so I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Again, thank you all for joining me. It's been a blast, and I'll see you all in the next episode of the podcast.